Now, what I think about is what's new when we try to operationalize security. So here is the approach that I think we should be thinking about. It's a new model. It's a risk-based, information-centric, responsive, workflow-driven. So it's risk-based, information-centric, responsive, workflow-driven. So what does that mean? When we say it's risk-based, it means that we have a framework for having a conversation with our lines of business about how we're going to manage risk and what are the risks that are acceptable for us to deal with. When we talk about being information-centric, all of us know, and you hear a lot of talk about the infrastructure, but the other thing that you got to think about is it's the information. Protecting the infrastructure is necessary but not sufficient. One of the most important things that we have to think about is where does that information live? What are the risks to that information? We also have to deal with this notion of virtualization, cloud computing. Where's that information being stored? Because it's increasingly separate from our own data centers and our own environments. And so we have to figure out how do we protect that information when it's not necessarily 100% in our control. When I talk about responsive, it means that we need to be situation aware. That means that we have a real-time view of what's happening. Our environment and our response is dynamic. So we need to be able to recognize threats, we need to be able to respond, and we need to be able to remediate very quickly without a lot of latency that allows the threats to expand or spread through your entire organization. When I talk about workflow-driven, this is probably the newest concept because it's about automating the day-to-day processes. And it's not just about automating between the security products. It's about closing the gaps between the security products and the tools you use for operations. It's about how do you make sure that a lot of the processes you have are highly automated and reduce the latency for remediation. When we think about operationalizing security, what we want to do is we have to get away from the siloed, piecemeal, opaque approach that we have today. It has to be risk-based, information-centric, responsive, and workflow-driven. The answer is to operationalize security. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean in practice? I think what it means is that it's important that we understand what is the risks that we're willing to deal with. What is the level of policies that we have to implement? Once you have the right policies defined, once you have the right design of your network environment, the technologies can create the workflows that automate what you've been doing manually. For example, let's say that you decide to set a policy that says customer credit card data can't be put on a USB device. Seems like a common policy. If you've got a DLP technology that's content aware, it can detect that somebody's trying to copy that information onto the USB device. If the employee starts downloading it and starts downloading that spreadsheet with 10,000 customer records, it can kick off a trigger that sets off an alert that notifies a workflow that basically allows the employee to be notified what they're doing, and potentially that's sufficient, or it can notify the administrator that there is a potential breach of information. You may decide, though, if it's the CEO, it's okay for them to take that action, even though I'd strongly recommend against it. But I think the point is that you've got a situation where you can define a policy and you can make decisions real time. You can automate the process of protecting information. If we think about it, all of these manual processes are a problem. And so part of the answer has to be in having the right workflows that notify the right people when something is happening. But more importantly, you can also build your escalation processes into it. If the administrator is not there, it can be escalated to their manager or to the next person in the notification or escalation path. I think when we think about what's going on, information walks out the door every day, and we're often not in control. When you operationalize security, it puts you in control.